Hi friends, Joe from McCleer Law Office, Oshkosh Elder Law and Estate Planning. I'm going to be doing a pretty much an off-the-cuff video here. It's the first video that I've ever done that is a response video. If you go on YouTube, you see some people will put out videos, they give their opinion on something, and then somebody will reply and say, okay, well, here's why I disagree with that. Just response videos are all over YouTube. I never thought I'd ever do this, but I just came across a video that I really feel I need to address. Now, the video is called Medicaid Trusts Are a Scam. Now, this is a video by, the site is CMS Law Firm, LLC. The attorney who's speaking in this video, his name is Christopher Small. I looked him up there just outside Seattle. Checked him out, pretty impressive. He seems like an earnest guy, really passionate about what he's talking about. And I looked at his Facebook page, and he has about 100 videos on there, so in ways, I look up to this guy from a marketing standpoint. But I wanted to address this. Now, why would I want to address this video? It's got about 3,000 views, so it's got a little bit of a reach, but there are plenty of videos about Medicaid trusts that have 10 times that amount of views. So why would I bother replying to this? I mean, obviously, it's Medicaid trusts are a scam. I'm going to disagree with that right off the bat. But the thing that I was concerned with was I got a little curious because I went on YouTube and I just searched Medicaid trusts. And wouldn't you know, there it is, the very first video that comes up, Medicaid trusts are a scam. And according to a good friend of mine, Nick, of Nick Charles Photography, who himself is a very fine marketer in his own right, he informed me that YouTube is the #2 search engine. Google's #1, obviously, and YouTube is actually the second. So if I'm going to ever, talk to somebody about Medicaid trusts, either at a meeting or at a seminar, and they want to do some research on their own, they go on YouTube, they type in Medicaid trust, this is the first one that's going to come up, so I feel like I have to respond to it. So there's some points he makes in the video, and there's a lot of points there's 5 main points actually he makes in the description, which he kind of talks about in the videos as well, but I think he spells it out better in the description. But I'll talk a bit about both. So first of all, Medicaid trusts are a scam. He used the term scam a couple of times. He used the term fraud. He says they don't work. He implies that it's a means to skirt the rules or to get around the rules. And blanketly, I disagree with all of that, without a doubt. A couple other points he makes in the video is he indicates that in order to become eligible for Medicaid, he brings up the asset limit. He says it's $2,000. Now, that's true as well here in Wisconsin, but that's for a single individual. If you follow me, you know that married couples can keep substantially more than just $2,000. He also mentioned that there was an income cap in order to become eligible for Medicaid. He said it was about $16,000 a year. That may be Washington. There are income cap states, and then there are not income cap states. In Wisconsin, we are not an income cap state, so there is no amount of income that you can make that would make you ineligible unless it's more than the Medicaid benefit, essentially. Okay, so you understand, if you're going to be making more in income than Medicaid could possibly pay out to a nursing home, then they can't help you. There's no reason for them to help you. But as far as everything else, if you make less than the Medicaid benefit in Wisconsin, then you'll be fine. He mentioned in the video that some attorneys will charge upwards of $10,000 for Medicaid trust. That's probably true. I don't charge that much on a prospective basis. I mean, things could be changed if we're in a crisis circumstance. Then very typically, yes, you do see costs above $10,000, even $15,000. But when you think about it, it's a big tough bullet to bite. But for Medicaid planning, if it's a matter of preserving what could be something like your house or anything that's really, really important to you, then even in an emergency situation, those large costs, $10,000, could be worth it. But prospective planning, at least for me, it doesn't get near that amount. And for most attorneys that I'm aware of, they don't charge that amount for prospective planning. As in, you're not doing this because you're going to the nursing home next week. You're doing this because you think you might need nursing home care sometime in the future, hopefully more than 5 years out. He mentioned, and okay, I'll just get into the 5 points that he brings up underneath in the description. and I'll take them one by one because he covers these a little bit in the video, but really spells them out pretty well in the description here. So the 5 truths that he brings up, he says, number 1, there is a look-back period of 5 years. Until that 5 years is up, your assets are not safe. Okay, now I would say that's half true. Yes, there's a look-back period of 5 years. That's obviously true in Wisconsin as well. So that's prospective planning. You try to get 5 years in front of you. You try to say, all right, well, we're going to do this. Ideally, we have at least 5 good years in front of us. 5 years before we, not necessarily go into a nursing home, 5 years before we have to apply for Medicaid. Now, but to say that your assets are not safe, that's not true. Your assets essentially are safe as soon as you take them out of your name and put them in the name of the trust. Maybe you are not safe. That's what needs to be clarified. I did the video on the look-back period. I'll link to it in the description here as well. Speaking of linking to the video, I'm sure you probably want to, I'm referring to this video that you haven't seen. I thought about, okay, well, I'm going to show the video and talk with it. I'm pretty sure that'd be safe from a copyright standpoint, but I just don't want to bother with that. I'll just say, I'll link to Mr. Small's video in the description as well. You should give it a watch. I mean, he makes some truths in there. There's some truths in there, and you should watch it and check out some of those other videos as well. Give them the clicks. But as far as my video for the look-back period, it explains that what happens if you don't get that 5 years out, your assets could still be safe, but you could be penalized for a period of days, weeks, months, or even longer where you'd be ineligible for Medicaid. Now, sometimes that's okay, and sometimes in a crisis situation, we don't have 5 years and we're fine with that. We still use a Medicaid plan, put assets in there in anticipation of being penalized. Because if the penalty is going to be less than 5 years, say you want to put your house in an emergency and it's crisis planning, and you'll be penalized for maybe a year or a year and a half. All right, is there something we can do so we can protect that house in the trust and absorb that penalty period of a year to year and a half by way of a new income stream? There are methods to do that in crisis planning. So I would say it's true you got that 5-year look-back period, but it's not necessarily true that your assets would not be safe if you don't have those 5 years in front of you. Okay, number 2, and I'll do number 2 and number 3 because they kind of blend together. You will have to give up complete control over your assets. This is number 2. If there is an emergency and you need your assets, you will not be able to access them. Number 3, you will have to name someone else as the trustee over your property. In the video, he shows that those two really go together. The reason you give up control is because you name somebody else as a trustee. Starting with number 3, there's no rule, at least in Wisconsin, that you have to name somebody else as a trustee, but I and most other elder law attorneys will do that as a matter of course. It's a good idea for Medicaid trust to have somebody else serve as your trustee, and there's a myriad of reasons for doing that. So it says you have to give up complete control over your assets. That's not necessarily true. There's a lot of strings you can hang on to that will not disrupt the protection that a Medicaid trust will give you. As far as, say, your residence, you can establish so that you can continue to live in your residence for as long as you want to. You just got to keep paying the costs that you are normally paying for them, your taxes, your mortgage if you still have one, your insurance, your utilities. You keep doing that. You can set up the rules that even though the house is now owned by the trust, you could still live in it for as long as you want to. Other assets, like if you put stock in there, yes, you are giving up your immediate control to tinker with those. Those would be in the hands of the trustee that you name, but you still have strings upon that trustee that would say, all right, if the trustee is not acting appropriate with the assets, you can still say remove a trustee and replace it. It just would not be able to be you. If there's an emergency, this is the second part of number 2, if there's an emergency and you need your assets, you will not be able to access them. That is the plan. The plan is that whatever assets you put into your trust, particularly liquid assets, you do so with a plan that you will not need them or want them. So that's why you're pretty conservative by what you put into your trust. If there's a chance that you would actually want to spend the money somewhere down the line that you had put into your trust, then you kind of, even if there's a small inkling that that might be the chance, then maybe you don't put it in. You leave it out. It's subject to long-term care costs at that point, but you're not hamstringing yourself to the point where you're not enjoying your retirement years because you put a bunch of your money away. So that is a mostly true point. There's some nuance to that as well. So number 4, if you do even one thing out of line with Medicaid rules, all of your assets could be subject to seizure for your long-term care. Okay, so yeah, that's true, which is why you don't want to do it with somebody who is not an expert in the field. So as far as for establishing Medicaid trusts, I and other members of Elder Council and NALA, the National Academy of Elder Law Attorneys, they're the folks who really make sure we're doing it right. And we do the education, we do the training that we need to do it, and we put together the good trusts to make sure that they work. And then we offer ourselves as assistants to make sure that you, as a trust maker or grantor, or that your trustee isn't going to be doing something wrong down the line. Now, even if you make the perfect trust, even if I was an attorney make the perfect trust, is it possible that it could be screwed up down the line because the trustee did something wrong? Yes, which is why it's important you name somebody who is not going to be loose with the rules. And if there are any questions, you come back to me or another expert to say, okay, can I do X, Y, or Z? And we'll let you know. If it's set up right, which if you go to the experts, they will be, and if the rules are adhered to, then it will be safe. And number 5, there are other ways to pay for long-term care that are significantly more effective and above board. And he lists namely long-term care insurance and or life insurance policy with a long-term care rider. He mentions in the video that these tend to be cheaper and easier to set up. So I'll address those points first. Now, I can't say necessarily easier to set up. I did just hear, as part of a panel presentation, the other night, and a fellow named Neil Dunham in the area here was talking about these other second type of products. They are asset-based long-term care insurance products. They sound pretty easy to set up, I do have to say. Now, would they be cheaper? No, they would not be cheaper. Even you'd be putting in probably right off the bat at least $50,000 to $80,000. That's at the small end. Most likely you'll be doing much more in order to get the protection, in order to get the insurance protection. For traditional long-term care insurance, which is becoming more and more rare in our society, the premiums are going to add up to the point where after you paying for about a year or maybe 2 years, you're going to have most likely by that point paid more in premiums than you would for a Medicaid trust. Depending on which attorney you go to, but those premiums are going up, particularly as you age. They're going to keep rising, and after a while, it's going to get to the point where it's like, a year's worth of premiums or a Medicaid trust. Now, I'm not saying that insurance is bad. Insurance is really good, and if you find a product that works for you, I like long-term care insurance because it can offer you some good protection, and it can give you a lot more freedom with your assets. You're not putting anything away with the idea that you're never going to be able to use it again. So he's significantly more effective, though, in making this point. I wouldn't agree to that. I think that Medicaid trusts are perfectly effective for taking assets out of the reach of a Medicaid, the nursing home. And above board, Medicaid trusts are above board. And he mentioned, earlier he talked about skirting the rules, getting around the rules. I understand if this may say, okay, well, we're putting assets aside, so are we cheating the system? Here's what I'll say to that. 5 years ago, state of Wisconsin, they really overhauled Medicaid rules, particularly when it comes to going after assets after the individual has passed away, estate recovery. But they had a chance to, change a whole bunch of different avenues to say, okay, do this now is against the rules. And they did. They made a lot of different rules with regards to life estates, with regards to revocable trusts, with regards to beneficiary designations, which makes them accessible for the taking. They left irrevocable Medicaid trusts alone. And these were not, being used in the shadows. These were, being used all the time, even back then. And they were aware of this, and they still said, okay, those are fine. And if you look up the Medicaid eligibility rules, they talk about these types of trusts. So they are aware of them and they say, yes, these work. So this is not a way to get around the rules. This is not something that's not above board. This is just an option. Medicaid trusts are an option to become qualified for Medicaid. You can spend down either by paying your nursing home continually or converting the assets to some assets that would not be considered for Medicaid spend down, like residence or a new vehicle, or if you had done this correctly, utilizing a Medicaid trust. So that's pretty much where I'm going to leave it at. This one's being a lot longer than I thought it was going to be. This guy seems like a cool guy. I would check out the video. As I said, I'm going to link it below. Chris, if you see this, I enjoy your video. I enjoy your marketing strategy, and just to say, if you ever want to talk about these Medicaid trusts, you give me a call. For everybody else, you know how to reach me. www.mccleerlaw.com is my website. You can check me out on Facebook, facebook.com/McCleerLaw, or you can call my office, 920-221-0320. We can sit down, have a chat, talk more about these Medicaid trusts or any other estate planning or long-term care planning options. So that's all I got today. Everyone have a good week. How do I turn this off?